Can't wait to see the Kelly Green jerseys back in action as the Philadelphia Eagles host the Miami Dolphins on Sunday Night Football. These threads, some of the freshest in all of sports. And speaking of that Eagles-Dolphins matchup, we'll be doing a watch party for it. And in the lead up to that game, can we get to 58,000 subscribers? We continue to grow the Eagles Now family right here on YouTube. And if you want shows every single day that'll make you a smarter football fan and a more informed Eagles fan, that's why you subscribe to the show. With that, let's start it. Let's go. Today's Philadelphia Eagles Now is presented by Manscaped. You can get 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com/chat. We'll put that link down in the comments section and in the description of this video, and we'll tell you more about what Manscaped has to offer with some new products coming up here in a little while. As for what we're getting into on today's show, there's some buzz that maybe the Eagles could trade away Quez Watkins after signing Julio Jones earlier this week, and the Eagles making a couple of roster moves. First, though, I want to start off on the Eagles injury front because there are some new additions to the Eagles injury report and a couple of players who partook in practice this week, and it looks as though they're going to be able to give it a go. So it's concerning here considering the opponent that the Eagles are facing this week in the Miami Dolphins. They have the #1 overall offense in the National Football League. And on Wednesday, Reed Blankenship did not practice because of a rib injury. Lane Johnson out with an ankle. Bradley Roby with that shoulder injury that knocked him out of that game against the Jets. And then a new addition to the Eagles injury report, that's Devontae Smith with the hamstring. He, too, did not practice on Wednesday. The good news here for Philadelphia is that Jalen Carter was a limited participant, and it looks as though he's going to be able to play. And then also notably on that list, Darius Slay on his podcast vowed that he was going to return. He said that Josh Dobe did a great job last week against Garrett Wilson, and Darius Slay, it looks as though he's going to be able to play against Miami as well. And Brian Baldinger, we love Baldy here on the show. He said he worked out with Lane Johnson this week, and Lane Train is going to be on the field rocking those Kelly Greens. So if the Eagles had the best right tackle in the game starting, it's obviously going to give a boost to this Eagles offense. Now to the latest Eagles trade buzz. It's humming right now with the NFL trade deadline coming up on October 31st, and there's some speculation out there that after the Eagles sign Julio Jones, Quez Watkins may be on his way out and might be the odd man at wide receiver. And you look at the Eagles wide receiver depth chart right now, Quez is on IR with that hamstring injury that's been nagging him all throughout this year. You have one of the best 1-2 punches in the league in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. Hopefully Smitty can get going, and hopefully he can play against the Dolphins, given the problems in their secondary banged up with Jalen Ramsey back at practice but not going to play on Sunday night. And as Julio Jones, if he's activated to the 53-man roster in the lead up to this game or even after it, become wide receiver 3 with Olamide Zaccheaus at wide receiver 4. Quez Watkins still has to be on IR over the next 3 weeks, and with the deadline coming up in about 2 weeks, is Quez going to get dealt? Here's why a trade makes sense in my estimation. Once Quez comes back, is he going to get playing time now? Because you're bringing in Julio Jones for a reason, and Julio even said, I'm here to prove that I can still play in this league, and I think that Julio, while he's not the #1, and he's far from those days of being a #1, he could at least be a solid #3 option. So once he comes back, Olamide Zaccheaus has given this team some pretty good snaps. Does Quez Watkins even have a role on this team? And if he doesn't, will a wide receiver needy team make that call to Philadelphia? What also makes sense is that Quez does offer another team vertical speed if they're looking for that in a wide receiver. And from the Eagles' standpoint, do you try to get some value back for a player on his rookie contract who you're probably not going to re-sign in NFL free agency? And in my opinion, my eyes, I think that Olamide Zaccheaus is simply the better player. He doesn't have that vertical speed, but how often does that vertical speed actually impact this Eagles offense? It doesn't really, in my opinion, because Quez Watkins isn't really making a lot of plays downfield. From Nick Sirianni's seat, here's how he envisions things shaking out at wide receiver. He did say that the Birds still have faith in Quez and Oz. The signing of Julio Jones is about the lack of depth, he said, and the Quez Watkins injury. And as for how this happened, Sirianni said that him and Howie Roseman oftentimes get together, they watch tape, and they find out and they figure out if they want to sign a player or not. They did that with Julio Jones. They looked back at the tape last year with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He passed with flying colors, so they decided to bring Julio Jones in. Quez has certainly been a very frustrating player for Philadelphia because in year two, you saw the glimpses of a late-round pick starting to put it all together, and that vertical speed is appealing. He had 62 targets that year, 43 catches, 647 yards, 15 yards per catch. And I think that the acquisition of A.J. Brown certainly diminished his role in this offense, but look, he's had ample opportunities to prove the type of player that he can be, and in the last 2 years, he hasn't really been that productive player for this Eagles offense. We talk about the speed. He gets it done in preseason. He plays well in training camp as a training camp star, but has it ever translated to the actual game field consistently enough? No, it has not. So if I'm Howie Roseman, I'm thinking about dealing him away if the value is pretty solid back. For instance, New York Jets, they traded away Mecole Hardman back to the Kansas City Chiefs after signing him to a 1-year, $4 million contract. They got back like a 6th and 7th round pick. Could the Eagles get a little bit more or around the same for Quez Watkins? So with that, we tee up one of our questions for the audience here today. Should the Eagles trade Quez? Give me a T for trade or a P for pass. As for the latest on Julio Jones, he did practice with Philadelphia and arrived at the NovaCare complex on Wednesday. He is going to be rocking the number 80. Here he is at his locker room taking questions from the Philadelphia media for the first time. And a couple of takeaways from what he had to say to introduce himself to Eagles fans and to the media and to this team. When asked how much gas he has left in the tank, he said, quote, "Watch and find out. We will revisit this question on what his expectations are for his individual play." Pretty confident dude. I mean, he's 16th all-time in receiving yards in NFL history. He said, watch and find out. We're going to revisit that on what his expectations are for his production. He said, my mindset is to dominate here. Do not get it twisted. Some other kind of takeaways. He said, this is a model organization in the NFL. This is what you look for as a player. Very team-oriented organization as well. Coming up next here on the show, we have a new Lane Johnson injury update and the Eagles making a couple of roster moves this week that we certainly want to recap as well. Stay tuned for that because if you're a real one, you're going to continue to hang out with us. But first, at the start of the show, I said Philadelphia Eagles Now is presented by Manscaped. The Philadelphia Phillies are hitting balls out of the ballpark. If you want to clean up your balls, Manscaped will help you take your balls out of the ballpark as well. 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com/chat. Promo code chat. Gentlemen across the nation, I have an urgent message for you. This episode presented by Manscaped. The brand that took your balls to outer space like a Bryce Harper home run going to orbit is now launching them into the ultrasphere. Introducing the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. This features a new cutting-edge design, next-generation dual skin-safe blade, helps for different shaves, but you also won't get yourself cut up down below like Diamondback pitchers. It's pretty much a spaceship to take your boys downstairs to the next level. So join the 9 million men worldwide who have put their trust in Manscaped. The deal, manscaped.com/chat. Promo code chat for 20% off and free shipping. Take your balls to the moon, just like a Bryce Harper home run, Kyle Schwarber home run, Nick Castellanos home run, and of course, you already know I'm rocking the Phils here at the Chat Sports office. Next up, Lane Johnson injury update. Is he going to be able to play against the Dolphins? Philadelphia could certainly use him because they're going to have to keep up with that potent Dolphins offensive attack. He is still fighting to play on Sunday Night Football, according to Nick Sirianni. Sirianni said, quote, "I'll never count out Lane." He left in the first quarter of that Eagles loss to the New York Jets. And I briefly mentioned this a little bit earlier, but Brian Baldinger, former NFL player, played for the Eagles at one point, now a film guru, working for NFL Network and a couple of other outlets, making consistent radio appearances all across the country. I love Baldy and his film breakdowns. He oftentimes goes to Lane Johnson's little, looks like a backyard shed, backyard garage, a man cave of sorts for throwing around some iron. And he worked out with Lane Johnson this week. He said he's going to be able to play. against the Dolphins. And we know that Lane is an Iron Man of sorts and battles through injuries, and even when he is banged up, he's still able to be a very productive player. This year, very productive player as well for a guy who could be a future Hall of Famer, best right tackle in the game. 382 total snaps, 213 pass blocking snaps, only 1 penalty, 0 sacks allowed this year, 2 hits, 8 total pressures. He has not given up a sack since 2020. That's crazy. And if Lane can't go, and as part of the Eagles' struggles against that really, really good and top-tier Jets defense, Jack Driscoll stepped in, and he really struggled. 43 snaps, he gave up a sack, a quarterback hit, 8 pressures, and 6 hurries. Lane Johnson since 2020, 1,300 snaps, 0 sacks, and 3 quarterback hits. It's really crazy what he's been able to do for a long period of time, especially when you think about the fact that Lane Johnson always goes up against some top-tier rushers almost every single week. And then lastly, some Eagles roster moves here. The move for Julio Jones, in case you missed our breakdown and our breaking news coverage of that the other day, the Eagles actually signed him to the practice squad. And the expectation is that they're going to get him up to speed. Hopefully he can master that playbook. And then once that happens, he's going to be a quick elevation to the active roster. Is it going to be against Miami on Sunday? We will see. If not, the following week, probably. The Eagles also signed cornerback Josiah Scott off the Steelers practice squad this week. Scott, a former 4th-round pick of the Jacksonville Jaguars, spent the last 2 years with Philadelphia. While he doesn't know this specific defensive scheme run by Sean Desai, because Sean Desai, Vic Fangio disciple, does some different things as compared to Jonathan Gannon, he does have familiarity with this organization and some of the players on this defense, and I imagine they have some of the same calls in the secondary, and the communication on the back end is going to be really important against a Dolphins team that runs some of the most pre-snap motion in the NFL to try to confuse the opponents and identify if a defense is playing man or zone. And then the Eagles released Mario Goorich, and then they brought him back to the practice squad. So released him off the 53, made room for Josiah Scott, then signed Goorich to the practice squad, a slot corner who obviously knows this defense as well. So be honest with me before we hop on out of here. Your confidence level in the Birds beating the Dolphins and those Kelly Green threads, scale it for me from 1 to 10. Again, we'll be live an hour before kickoff on Sunday night, giving away a Vince Papale signed autographed jersey that's also Kelly Green, as well as an Eagles hat. You don't want to miss it, and we'll catch you then. But you can catch our content every single day in the lead up to kickoff.